Good morning to you all. First, I would like to thank and welcome our esteemed speakers and participants. My name is Abdulaziz Deshti. I am the manager of Risk Management Group at Kuwait Gulf Oil Company, a subsidiary of KPC. It is my privilege to be the moderator of the 6th edition of Kuwait Enterprise Risk Management Conference. Over the past editions, this conference brought together ERM experts from around the globe to share with us the latest development in the ERM field, which were well received and appreciated. For this year's 6th edition, we have selected COVID-19 pandemic as the conference slogan due to its enormous global effect. Our esteemed speakers will be sharing their insight regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and ERM current issues and challenges. Please welcome Dr. محمد الصبان. He received his PhD in economics from University of Colorado. He worked as an advisor for the Minister of Petroleum and the Minister of Industry and Electricity in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He participated in several OPEC meetings. He has extensive experience in the oil and gas field. So please, Dr. Muhammad, the mic is yours.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to thank KPC for making this opportunity available to me. I am here speaking on my personal capacity. I am not an advisor to the Ministry of Petroleum anymore. I retired a few years ago. I used to be the head of the Saudi delegation for 30 years in climate change negotiations. And the big challenge that we are facing is not the COVID-19, as been said excellently by the previous speaker. That is a temporary challenge, a temporary incident, and it will come all the consequences that we have. However, climate change has been used to transfer the burden to developing countries, and particularly to those countries who are highly dependent on the exportation of fossil fuel, and in particular on the exportation of oil. The UNFCCC, which is the Convention of Climate Change, started saying we are calling for a comprehensive approach. Comprehensive approach means to reduce all greenhouse gases, not only CO2, as being stipulated in the Paris Climate Agreement, and in all economic sectors, and not only energy sector, and not only addressing addressing the sources of greenhouse gases, but also the sinks of greenhouse gases. Of course, Brazil and other Amazonian countries were rejecting to include sinks and to include deforestation because of their national interest. But I'm totally surprised to see that CO2 is the name of the game in the current Paris Agreement, and also energy sector is also the main target of the how to combat climate change. The problem is, even with this, we see that coal has continued to be subsidized by the industrialized countries and other large countries, and they are since they have huge reserves of the coal, and they are resisting. Now we started to raise the issue of coal to be equally treated with the oil, and they are attacking oil producing countries that you are against the environment, against protecting the environment, forgetting that coal emits more greenhouse gases than oil and gas. The problem is, of course, is that they are talking now about carbon tax, but we have never have a carbon tax or a true carbon tax. A carbon tax, basically, when they talk about it, ends to be the simple gasoline tax. We have seen that discrimination or different treatment of the energy sector, of the energy sources, being biased against oil. In the meantime, of course, oil exporting countries like ours, GCC and others, we are trying to, we are not against renewable energy sources. We are not against combating climate change. However, we are against the hypocrisy by the West to implement it in a way to reduce dependency on oil imports. It's very simple. And we have seen President Biden, he started by saying, I will abolish oil and gas industry in the United States. But now he's gradually opening up the federal land for the oil industry to be to invest and invest more. Of course, at the same time, they are talking about there is a call for the border tax adjustment. And what they mean by that, any commodity that will be sent to the West or to industrialized countries, they will face high tariffs if they have GHG content in it. And that's really biased, because at the time when we are utilizing, or we are continue to have the oil and gas industries and coal industry in the industrialized countries flourish and more investment there, they are penalizing developing countries as if they are transferring the whole burden of climate change to developing countries, and that's not acceptable. Of course, the current crisis, that the energy crisis, because of the gas issue, is a major one, because it struck me that, well, if you call for international companies to stop investing in oil and gas exploration, then definitely with continued increase in demand, there will be a crisis and prices will be higher and higher. So I think from this point, we need to do two things as oil countries. One is that in the coming Glasgow meeting, we need to fight very hard to have a balanced and fair commitments. And let us remember that commitments are differentiated according to the Climate Convention. Those industrialized countries who advance much earlier than us, they need to bear more higher responsibility than developing countries. And this is according to the polluter pay principle. So they cannot equate commitments between developed and developing countries, and that is very clear in the convention. Secondly, there are many articles in the convention that we need to utilize, and including Article 4.8, which calls that those countries who are highly dependent on exportation of fossil fuel needs to be given high consideration, including transfer of funding, technology, etc. So I think we need to insist on having technology transfer to help our countries diversify economically, and also we need to have compensation because we are going to be hurt a lot as developing countries. I think if I can see the last slide, shows that with the current existing tax structure in the OECD countries, we see taxes for more than 50% of the final composite barrel of oil. And we see that from very clear from the diagram that I have shown here. UK is more than 60%, etc., etc. Denmark also, and other countries. So in addition to these high taxes, they want to add more taxes under the name and under the pretext of carbon, that it is carbon tax. While still until now, many countries in the OECD countries are still subsidizing coal, and they are resisting coal from Saudi Arabia and other oil exporting countries to remove these subsidies and to impose carbon tax according to the carbon content. So this biasness in the climate policies internationally should be removed, and they should remove market distortion in order to have an equal level of treatment and not to transfer the burden to developing countries. It is a permanent damage to the oil industry, and I think this is the biggest challenge that we have as an oil exporting countries. We cannot continue seeing this biasness internationally, and our delegations to the Glasgow meeting needs to raise their voice, and this is a national interest that they need to protect. At the same time, domestically, of course, we need to expand on renewable energies. We need to diversify energy sources and do the utmost in order to protect the environment. But at the same time, and Saudi Arabia and other countries are doing a lot in that field, and we can increase the greenery areas, including the initiative by Mohammed bin Salman to increase the greenery area by at least 10 billion new trees in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East. So we are doing our job. We are doing what we need to do. However, and voluntarily, of course, we should not accept in Glasgow that there will be legally binding commitments on developing countries. It is very clear in the convention, and we need to continue. There is a major principle in the convention saying it is common but differentiated responsibility. We need to utilize this. Being quiet in the negotiations will not be helpful for our generation and future generation to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saban. Very, very informative, and I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing you in future conferences regarding the same subject. I have two questions for Dr. Mohammed Saban. The first question: what is neutral or natural? Is it neutral crude oil condensate? How are they produced as green energy?
Okay. In response to that, I think we have, as been said by previous speaker, the carbon sequestration technologies that can take the carbon out of the crude oil and be used, and the carbon can be circulated through the different economic sectors in order to have the greatest benefit from this decarbonization. So there are many other solutions that will come up, of course, but definitely we need to recognize the real threat. The real threat is not how to decarbonize oil. The real threat is the international pressure, especially from the OECD countries on developing countries to transfer the burden to them. So if we can succeed in alleviating that, and we are ready to pay our fair share, but not more than our fair share. So if we can press this issue internationally, then we will be okay with our oil. Regarding the previous speaker, he said, well, you can go to petrochemical and others. Let us not forget that the transportation sector, which is the main objective of the climate policy, constitute more than 65% of the total world consumption of oil. So it is huge. If they destruct the demand on this sector, then that's it. We will end up having very low prices, and also the demand, the huge supplies, lower demand, and that will be a disaster for developing countries, especially for IOCD. Thank you.
Okay, and there's another question for you, Dr. Saban. Can you please elaborate more on the meaning of technology transfer related to Article 48?
Transfer technology on concessional basis. That is the article, what the article says. But there is no mentioning of that in the Paris Agreement. They elevated, they were strong enough to stop developing countries from raising this issue. Of course, the issue of technology and funding are the main issues for developing countries. And we have seen that very little funding coming out of the OECD countries, very, transfer technology being transferred on commercial basis. So the burden is very high. And if we take only technology, why they are promoting renewable energy, basically it is their technologies. They want to sell it to us and they want us to pay for it. So they are the beneficial of such transfer technology. And I think that's fine. But to add to it the other obstacles and other market distortion exist in OECD countries, that's unbearable.
Thank you, Doctor.